Picture this. Kerala, lush and green. The Bharathapuzha River winding peacefully through the landscape. It's the kind of scene that, makes you think of tranquility, right?
Absolutely beautiful, usually.
But look closer, especially in the Malappuram region, scratched beneath that serene surface. And, well, the reality is pretty disturbing. You see these skeletal cattle, barely alive, tied up along those very riverbanks.
Mhm.
And the whispers you hear from locals, they use this chilling phrase, murder for money.
That contrast is just jarring, isn't it? The natural beauty sort of becomes this backdrop for something so unnatural, so cruel. It really forces you to see that disconnect between the image and the reality on the ground.
Exactly. So today we're diving deep into this really troubling situation that seems to be unfolding in Malappuram. We want to understand this alleged, cruel scheme where some cattle traders are suspected of deliberately letting their insured cows die. Why? Just to collect the insurance payouts.
Yeah, and our understanding comes from, people write their firsthand accounts, local reports painting this grim picture.
So our mission, really, is to unpack how this alleged operation works. The mechanics of it, yes, but also, what are the impacts? Who is being affected? And maybe what systemic issues are allowing this to happen?
Right. We need to look at how it's supposed to be being done, the effects on the animals, obviously, but also the community and maybe the wider system itself.
And believe me, as we've looked into what's being reported, some really shocking details have come up. The amounts of insurance money involved, for one, and some deeply concerning allegations about potential involvement from, local authorities.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of this alleged scam then.
All right.
So what's being described, at its core, it sounds like a truly cold-blooded exploitation of the system. We're hearing that certain traders are getting hold of cattle for a relatively small amount, maybe 15, 20,000 rupees.
Right. Seems like a modest cost up front. But here's the really disturbing part. These same animals are then reportedly insured for way, way more, like around 80,000 rupees is what we're hearing.
That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
80,000?
It is. And that difference, that gap between the purchase price and the insured value, it's not just weird. It kind of hints at a maybe fundamental weakness in how these animals are valued for insurance and potentially creates this, perverse incentive. Right?
Precisely. And the story doesn't stop there. The allegations continue that the next step is just deliberate abandonment. These animals, they're not cared for. They're allegedly just left, to fend for themselves along the banks of the Bharathapuzha River.
And when we say abandoned, we mean it, like a total lack of the basics. No food, no water, no shelter from the sun or rain. You can almost picture these poor animals, maybe healthy just weeks before, just slowly fading away.
It's grim.
We have this powerful and honestly heartbreaking perspective from Rajesh NP. He's a local dairy farmer. His family's been doing this for generations. His firsthand account of seeing these skeletal cows by the river, it really hits home how serious this is.
And that experience, generations of it, gives his words real weight. He's not just seeing strays. He knows cattle. He knows the signs of terrible neglect. And he doesn't mince words. He basically says, look, this isn't just neglect. It's calculated. It's murder for money.
Wow. That's a heavy accusation.
It is, especially coming from someone witnessing it daily.
He talks about seeing an animal, barely alive one day and then finding it dead within the month. Rajesh's observations, they paint this consistent, really troubling picture. It suggests it's not just like one or two bad situations, but maybe a pattern, a deliberate thing.
Yeah, and adding to that, there's another local farmer, Suleiman C.P. He claims that in just one recent month, he personally counted 6 dead cows along just one stretch of the river.
6 in 1 month, on one stretch.
6. That gives you a horrifying sense of the potential scale here. And the reports really emphasize these aren't quick deaths. They're described as slow, agonizing. This is just awful to think about.
So if you piece it together, buy cheap, insure high, then deliberately neglect until the animal dies. The whole alleged financial motive seems to hinge on that death.
A truly chilling calculation.
Okay, but how? How are they allegedly getting away with this? It can't be as simple as just leaving a cow, right? There has to be a process for the insurance claim.
Right.
And this is where things get even murkier, where the role of local veterinary officers comes under, scrutiny. Given how many deaths are alleged, what weaknesses in the system are being exploited, where's the oversight failing?
That's the critical question, isn't it? The allegations suggest that some local veterinary officers might be involved, maybe through rush reports, inadequate examinations, or potentially even falsified documents about the cause of death. And those reports are absolutely essential to get the insurance payout.
We heard one particularly disturbing claim from Suleiman. He mentioned a report for a cow that was barely 5 years old.
Okay.
And the report supposedly said it died of old age.
Old age at 5 for a cow, that's just not plausible.
Exactly. It immediately throws up huge red flags. That kind of thing, it really points to serious potential issues with the whole reporting process, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests the system could be manipulated,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's negligence, being overworked, or, as some allege, something more deliberate. That image you painted earlier, the sunny banks of the Bharathapuzha, it becomes this incredibly stark backdrop for what sounds like, well, a gritty crime drama, as some locals put it.
Yeah, but the community there, the farmers, they aren't just sitting back and watching this happen.
No, definitely not. We're hearing about a significant organized response. They're acting together, which is important. Petitions have apparently been sent off to the district administration, to the animal husbandry department,
They're making their voices heard.
and their demands are very specific. They're not just vaguely complaining. They want action. They're calling for criminal charges against these traders, a full investigation into the whole alleged operation.
Makes sense.
They want the licenses of anyone implicated revoked, and a really thorough probe into how the veterinary staff handle these cases. Plus, they're demanding that the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act actually be enforced properly.
And Rajesh, the farmer we mentioned, he warned that things could escalate if this isn't addressed. He said something like they're fighting for their way of life. That really shows how deeply this is affecting them.
It cuts right to the core of their livelihood and their values.
We also heard from Amina K., another local, and she spoke really movingly about the bond farmers have with their animals. For her, and many like her, these aren't just, livestock or commodities, they're part of the family. Seeing them suffer like this, allegedly just for profit, it's deeply upsetting for them.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And it's worth noting, the Animal Husbandry Department has acknowledged these allegations. They've said a preliminary inquiry is underway.
Okay, so there's some official movement.
Some movement, yes, but, there's also this sense of cautious optimism among the locals. These kinds of official processes can sometimes drag on, take a long time.
Bureaucracy, right.
Exactly. But beyond the immediate scam allegations, there are these broader ethical questions.
Yeah.
Cows hold such a significant place in India culturally, sometimes spiritually. So this kind of alleged deliberate cruelty, it just feels like it goes against some really deeply held values.
Absolutely. And it's not just abstract ethics. There are real, tangible hits for the honest dairy farmers in Malappuram, too. Think about it. If insurance companies see a spike in claims like this,
Yeah.
they're probably going to hike up the premiums for everyone, which unfairly punishes the farmers who are actually doing the right thing, taking good care of their animals.
That's a really important point. It penalizes the responsible majority because of the alleged actions of a few. And then there are the environmental worries, too.
Oh, right, the river.
Yeah. Having decomposing animals along the Bharathapuzha River, that's got to have an impact on the ecosystem, maybe even contaminate water sources people rely on. So this alleged scam, it ripples outwards, affecting much more than just the traders and the specific animals involved.
Okay, so let's maybe dig a bit deeper into the system itself, the vulnerabilities. We touched on insurance, but what specific weaknesses allow this kind of thing to potentially happen, maybe even on a larger scale?
Well, the cattle insurance system in India, from what we gather, seems to have some potential weak spots. Policies might sometimes be based on, let's say, rough estimates of an animal's value, rather than strict, verified assessments.
Ah, okay. So room for inflation there.
Potentially, yes, and maybe not enough rigorous oversight during that initial insurance process. This could open the door for the kind of inflated values that are allegedly part of this scheme.
And then there's the claim verification step, those post-mortem reports we talked about.
Crucial, and we already mentioned the potential issues in rural areas like Malappuram. Veterinary services might be stretched thin, understaffed, overworked.
Right. So it becomes hard to investigate every single death thoroughly.
Exactly. That lack of capacity could create an environment where it's just difficult. As one anonymous vet reportedly said, if the paperwork looks okay on the surface, there might not always be the resources, or maybe even the time, to dig deeper, even if they have some suspicions. It creates a potential loophole, doesn't it? Easy to exploit if someone's determined to.
It's a sobering thought. That seemingly okay paperwork could be masking something so awful. And it sounds like Malappuram might not be the only place dealing with this.
Unfortunately, no. Reports suggest similar concerns about livestock insurance fraud have popped up in other states, too, places like Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu.
So it's potentially a wider systemic issue then.
It could well be. There was even a report back in 2023 from the Animal Welfare Board of India that apparently highlighted a rise in these kinds of fraud cases. They estimated pretty significant financial losses nationwide because of it.
Wow, so this isn't new and it's not isolated.
Seems not. This broader context really underlines that what's happening, or allegedly happening, in Malappuram might point to weaknesses in the whole regulatory system, or maybe its enforcement, across different parts of the country.
Which makes you wonder, why isn't this getting more attention, more headlines?
That's a good question. Maybe it lacks that sort of sensational element that often grabs the news cycle. And, the victims here, the animals, the honest local farmers, they might not have the same kind of platform or influence as victims in other types of scandals.
Still, the cruelty involved, you'd think it would warrant more public awareness.
You would hope so. And the demands coming from the farmers in Malappuram, they're clearly aimed at tackling these systemic problems head on.
Right, they want licenses canceled for anyone involved.
Yep. Thorough investigations into the vets, stricter animal welfare laws put in place, and just generally better oversight mechanisms.
There was an interesting idea mentioned too, wasn't there? Something about technology.
Ah, yes. The idea of using a blockchain-based cattle registry.
Blockchain, how would that help?
Well, think about it. Blockchain creates this, immutable, transparent record. You could potentially use it to track everything about an animal ownership, health records, insurance details, in a way that's really hard to tamper with.
Okay, so it makes it much harder to fake records or inflate values fraudulently.
Exactly. It could provide a much more reliable system for verification, making these kinds of alleged insurance scams significantly more difficult to pull off. It's a compelling thought, using tech for better welfare.
Definitely something to consider. Now, for people listening who are probably quite moved or angered by this and thinking, what can I possibly do?
Yeah.
There are ways to help, right? Even from afar.
Absolutely. Raising awareness is a huge first step. Just talking about this, sharing the information.
Getting the word out.
Yeah. Discussing it, maybe even contacting local representatives if you feel strongly, letting them know people are concerned. It all helps put pressure on authorities to take it seriously. And, of course, supporting animal welfare groups who are actually on the ground doing the work.
They can provide real, tangible help to the animals caught up in this.
Precisely.
And amidst all this darkness, there are some glimmers of hope, some positive actions happening.
Yes, thankfully. It's really encouraging to see what local animal welfare groups are doing. There's one called Pause for Malappuram, for instance. They've been actively rescuing some of these abandoned cows.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, getting them the care they need, finding them new homes. Their work really shows the compassion that still exists right there in the community. We heard they've rescued something like a dozen cows just since the beginning of 2025.
Wow. 12 lives saved already. That's significant.
It really is. And Priya Menon from the group talked about just how emotional it is, but also how rewarding to see these animals recover.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the farmers themselves, they're not just petitioning, they're taking action too.
Yes. That's another really positive development. Farmers like Rajesh and Suleiman have actually formed a local cooperative. They're monitoring the riverbanks themselves, looking out for suspicious activity.
So, community watch, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. They've even set up a WhatsApp group to coordinate, share info quickly. It's a great example of how local knowledge, combined with simple tech, can be used to fight back against this.
Have they had any success?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah.
They've managed to tip off authorities about cows they suspected were being mistreated, showing that their vigilance is making a real difference on the ground.
That's fantastic. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Even when you're up against something this awful, individuals and groups working together can really push back and stand up for, compassion and justice.
It truly is.
So wrapping this up, this alleged murder for money scheme in Malappuram, it's just deeply, deeply troubling. The callousness is hard to fathom, and the suffering of the animals is just devastating. And as we've discussed, this isn't just some isolated local problem. It throws up these huge, urgent questions about animal welfare standards, about ethical practices in big industries like insurance, and about the weaknesses in systems that are supposed to protect the vulnerable.
Yeah, this whole situation really forces us to ask a fundamental question, doesn't it? What does it actually mean when systems that we design, supposedly for protection, for a safety net, can be twisted and exploited for acts of such, well, profound cruelty. And maybe, what's our collective responsibility? What do we owe it to ourselves and to these animals to address these kinds of failures and ensure that vulnerable beings are actually protected?
It's a heavy question, definitely, but a vital one for all of us to think about. We really encourage you, our listeners, to keep exploring these complex issues, animal welfare, the ethics tied up in insurance and finance, and what it means to be, a responsible part of a wider community. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.